I want you to picture a library. Not just any library, but the library of your life. Every experience you've ever had is a book on its shelves. Most of these books are neatly cataloged, their stories integrated into the larger narrative of who you are. You can take them down, read a chapter, remember the joy or the lesson, and place them back on the shelf. They are part of you, but they don't overwhelm you. Now imagine there's one book, or perhaps a few, that are different. They're not bound properly, they're scorched, dripping with something you can't wipe off, and they have a terrifying habit of falling off the shelf on their own, flying open and forcing you to relive their most horrific pages. No matter how hard you try to shove them back, to lock them away in a vault, they keep getting out. That is the essence of post-traumatic stress. As a psychologist and a teacher, I find this metaphor powerful because it moves us away from the idea of being broken and towards the concept of an unintegrated memory. Trauma isn't just a bad memory. It's a memory that was formed under such an intense storm of stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, that your brain's normal filing system, the hippocampus, effectively shuts down. The experience isn't processed and stored as a coherent narrative in the past. Instead, it gets stuck in the raw, sensory, and emotional parts of the brain, like the amygdala, as fragmented pieces of the event. A sound, a smell, a burst of terror, a fragmented image. These fragments aren't stories you remember. They are experiences that happen to you again and again. Let me give you a practical example. Meet Sarah, a composite of many courageous people I've worked with. Sarah was in a minor car accident. Logically, she knew she was okay, but weeks later, while driving to work, the specific smell of overheated brakes from a truck next to her would trigger a visceral reaction. Her heart would pound, her vision would tunnel, and she would be instantly transported back to the moment of impact, not just thinking about it, but feeling it. Her logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, knew she was safe, but her survival brain, the amygdala, was screaming, "Danger! It's happening again." This is the neurobiological tug-of-war at the heart of PTSD. One part of you knows the war is over, but another part of you is still on the battlefield, standing guard. This is where we get the classic symptoms. The hypervigilance, where your nervous system is a tripwire, constantly scanning for threat. The avoidance, where you start changing your life to avoid those triggers. Sarah started taking a much longer route to work, avoiding highways, which began to shrink her world. And then there are the flashbacks, the nightmares, where that unbound book flies off the shelf and immerses you in its reality. This isn't a choice or a weakness. It's a malfunction of the threat detection system, a well-intentioned but flawed attempt by your brain to protect you from ever being that vulnerable again. So, if that's the problem, what does healing look like? It's not about erasing the book from your library. That's impossible. Healing is about finally being able to bind that book, to take those scattered, terrifying pages and turn them into a coherent narrative that you can place on the shelf, a narrative you can choose to take down and look at, rather than one that assaults you without warning. The first, and often most difficult step is to create a sense of safety in the present moment. Your nervous system needs to learn that it's okay to stand down. This isn't just a fluffy concept. It's a physiological retraining. It's what we call top-down regulation. This can be practices like controlled breathing, not just take a deep breath, but something specific like box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. This directly stimulates the vagus nerve, the main nerve of your parasympathetic rest and digest system, and sends a direct signal to your amygdala that the body is safe. It's ground control establishing contact with a panicked astronaut. Mindfulness and grounding techniques fit here too, naming 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. It pulls you out of the internal horror movie and back into the safety of the present environment. Once a foundation of safety is established, we can begin the deeper work of processing the trauma itself. This is the bottom-up work. You can de-think your way out of a trauma response because the trauma isn't stored in the thinking part of the brain. It's stored in the body and the emotional brain. This is where therapies like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or somatic experiencing are so effective. They don't require you to narrate the trauma in graphic detail. Instead, they use techniques like bilateral stimulation, following a therapist's finger with your eyes or tapping alternating sides of your body to help the brain reprocess the stuck memory. It's as if the bilateral stimulation mimics the processing that happens during REM sleep, allowing the brain to finally do the filing job it couldn't do in the moment of crisis. The memory becomes a memory, not a recurring reality. For Sarah, this meant, in a safe therapeutic container, gently bringing to mind the image of the car accident while simultaneously engaging in bilateral stimulation. The first few times, the panic was intense. But over sessions, something remarkable happened. The memory began to change. It lost its visceral, overwhelming charge. She could recall the event without being catapulted back into it. The sound of brakes became just a sound again, not a trigger. The book was being bound. Alongside this, we work on the meaning-making piece. Trauma doesn't just wound us. It often shatters our fundamental beliefs about the world being safe, predictable, or just. A crucial part of healing is reconstructing a worldview that can accommodate this terrible thing that happened. This is where post-traumatic growth can emerge. It's not that the trauma was good, but that the process of wrestling with it forges strengths and insights that might not have existed otherwise. I've seen survivors of profound trauma develop a deeper sense of compassion, a re-evaluation of what truly matters in their relationships, a newfound personal strength, and a richer, more complex spiritual life. They don't just return to a pre-trauma baseline. They transform. They integrate the story. Healing is not a linear process. There will be days when the book feels loose on the shelf again. Triggers you thought you'd neutralized might pop up. This isn't failure. It's the nature of the journey. The goal isn't to never have a painful thought or feeling about the event again. The goal is to change your relationship with the memory. It's the difference between being in the storm and watching the storm from a strong, safe shelter. You see the rain, you hear the thunder, but you are no longer drowning in it. If you see yourself in this story, please know this: your reactions are not a sign of madness or weakness. They are the testament of a human nervous system that endured something overwhelming and is doing its best to protect you. The very fact that you be struggling is a sign of your brain's powerful instinct to survive. Healing is possible. It requires courage, the courage to feel, to remember, and to slowly, gently, teach your body and mind that the war is over, and that in this present moment, you are safe. It's about reclaiming your library, not as a place of terror, but as the complete, complex, and resilient story of you. You are not just the trauma. You are the one who is learning to bind the book, to place it on the shelf, and to walk forward, lighter, into the rest of your story.